English translation, 447th contact. Friday, 20th April 2007, 23:18 hours.
Hello, Ptaah. Heartfelt welcome, and my greetings as the welcome. I really did not expect to see you today. I am also surprised you did not call me.
You have these articles here on your desk, so I read them, which I just finished 2 minutes ago. Actually, I have been here for a good hour, and I thought you were coming over to dedicate yourself to your work. Well, it is later than I thought. Your article is probably the one I told you to write and send to the governments and other responsible persons. It is good, and in my sense, as well as the second article, which is not yours, but that of a woman named Andrea Bertuccioli. It would be desirable if you would also use this article. Be greeted now, dear friend.
That was my wish too, which is why I combined the two articles together, also in a special bulletin, in number 36. Both articles will also be translated into English by Marianne and Willem, after which the whole thing will be sent out in German and English by email, some of it perhaps by post. But regarding Andrea Bertuccioli, this is not a woman, but a man from Italy. Actually, you should know him from his various articles and bulletins.
Ah, of course. I remember. He always writes good articles for the bulletins. It was not exactly present to me. And besides, I was assuming our female names, which in very rare exceptions end with a letter other than an A. Andrea means for us that it is a female name-bearer.
All right, it is not an accusation. Thanks for your good opinion about the articles.
Then we will keep them in this form and send them to the governments and other responsible ones, etc., in the world.
And so that later readers of our conversation will know what these articles are about, I will attach them right away.
To all governments and officials of the world.
Already on the 5th of July 1951 and the 25th of August 1958, I sent warnings to governments and other world leaders about what was going to happen on the Earth in the future in all relations of climate and humans and their actions. They were warnings concerning predictions which have since been fulfilled in a frighteningly complete manner. My warning was based on an absolutely reliable source regarding the predictions made about the future of Europe and the whole world. These predictions had nothing to do with prophecies, because they were based on a forecast of the real future, which showed the following. In a few years, the climatic conditions in Europe and throughout the world were changed so drastically through human fault that global warming as a result of the greenhouse effect caused extreme storms of all kinds to appear in such a wise that they caused enormous material damage to land, houses, other buildings, roads, mountains, railway tracks, torrents, streams, rivers, and lakes. Throughout the world there have been tremendous storms, typhoons, tornadoes and hurricanes, ice, rain and snowstorms, as well as tremendous droughts, floods, landslides, tremendous forest fires, earthquakes and seaquakes, tsunamis and volcanic eruptions. And all of this will continue and get worse. Hundreds of thousands of lives have already been lost as a result of these climate-related upheavals and storms, and millions of deaths will continue to be lost because, in the coming period, we will see even more rapid and increasing climate warming and climate change, which is already unstoppable. Already in the 1950s I warned, but that does not mean the end of the events, because when the new millennium has arrived, nature will rebel even further and more powerfully against the environmentally destructive madness of humankind and reach a level that will remind us of the primeval times of the Earth. If the whole climate disaster and the coming events resulting from the climatic change are considered and analyzed, then the earthly future looks bleak. However, very few responsible ones still want to admit that humankind itself is largely responsible for the coming disaster and chaos, as well as for all catastrophes of all kinds, and that about 75% of them are to blame. Although the looming catastrophe has already become apparent in strong forms and visible to realists, there are still pathologically ones of low intelligentum, as well as irresponsible know-it-alls, governments and scientists, etc., who still antagonistically claim the opposite. And the fact that the real cause of all the evils existing on the earth in every respect is recognized and something useful is done about it is all the more a factor that is not recognized. Because the stupidity of not recognizing and not understanding the effective factors of truth and reality is just as great as the rejection of the only effective and radical measure, which is based on a drastic limitation or reduction of overpopulation through a regulation of a worldwide birth stop, or a rigorous birth regulation. It should finally become clear to all rulers, authorities, scientists, and other responsible persons on the earth, as well as to humanity on the earth, what the main cause of all evils and disasters on our world is. But to understand and accept this, a sound mind is needed, just as a sound rationality is needed to take the most urgent, rigorous, and radical measures to counteract environmental and world destruction. But the same rationality is needed to get rid of all affliction, misery, epidemics, criminality and felonies, as well as child sexual abuse, child abuse of any form, as well as prostitution of all kinds, which is as our tendon, getting very badly out of control of the good human nature more and more. The same applies to the oppression and exploitation of women, hatred, vengeance and the desire for revenge, religious and political fanaticism and delusion, racial and xenophobia, ideological and state military terror, but also in relation to the worldwide natural disasters, the rapidly advancing global warming and climate change, air pollution and environmental destruction, etc., etc., for which overall countermeasures must be worked out and taken. But this can only be useful when the basic evil of all evils is finally recognized and effective countermeasures are taken. This basic evil, however, does not want to be recognized and fought by all high and higher responsible persons on the earth, nor by individual humans of the earthly population. The main reason for this negation lies in the supposed freedom of the human being to do what he or she pleases, and to do it without consideration of losses, or without consideration of the fact that through this false freedom of self-decision with regard to the fulfillment of one's own wishes and drives, etc., the climate and the world is shaken to its foundations and slowly but surely destroyed. The fundamental evil of all evils and catastrophes is based on the factor of overpopulation, because overpopulation alone is to blame for all destruction, not only for global warming and environmental destruction, but also for all human Ausartungen, the getting very badly out of control of the good human nature, energy and water shortages and all other evils. The ever-increasing open prostitution and crime, the problem of asylum seekers and refugees, neo-Nazism and all other problems, large and small, are also due to overpopulation. And when lunatics, such as the Pope and other irresponsible people, plead, "Go forth and multiply," such elements equate themselves with ideological or religious terrorists and fanatics, as well as with state and war criminals, alias those with state power and their vassals, who murder in the name of their country, the alleged security and freedom, as well as the alleged fight against terror, and have them murdered by their military and secret services. In fact, in view of the rampant overpopulation and the resulting global evils, insoluble problems and blatantly increasing disasters among humans and in nature, climate and the planet, it is an unprecedentedly despicable crime to advocate procreation rather than to stop it in a controlled manner and only allow procreation when the law allows it. However, irresponsible humans who nevertheless demand or even advocate reproductive madness, or who do not prevent it in a responsible manner by means of authoritative laws, should be punished extremely severely, which also affects the rulers as well as every single person in the population. This seems to be a blatant measure and an intrusion into the private life of the individual, which is always put forward by ignorant and egoistic people as a defense of privacy. This may be so in a certain sense, but this privacy must be abandoned in relation to a rigorous and controlled birth stop if the earthly world is to be maintained as a functioning planet, and if terrestrial humanity is ultimately to survive. So, out of pure rationality and logic, a certain amount of privacy must be given up for the survival of humanity and a functioning planet, as well as the selfishness of the supposed right to do as one pleases. If this does not happen, then it can already be foreseen today that the final destruction of planet Earth and the downfall of earthly humankind, or its miserable vegetation, is only a matter of time. That is why it is necessary that each individual takes his or her responsibility in every respect, and also restricts the rights of his private sphere with regard to descendants. If any problems are tackled and solutions are worked out, then these, when they come about, are already outdated again and condemned to nullity, because during the time when they are worked out and created as a final project, they are already outdated again, and to a great extent insufficient, because in the time from the planning and up to the final product, the Earth's population has again increased by hundreds of millions of humans. Consequently, the products created to alleviate the problems are already tremendously outdated again and again, require new projects. So, there are more and more progressive and endless problems, whereby one hole is plugged with a new hole, and so every problem causes two new problems. Against this and against all other evils, harsh, drastic measures have to be taken, as well as against the world domination-addicted machinations of the state powers, which cause wars all over the world, wage wars themselves, and plunge other countries into chaos, and want to break and eradicate their mentality, religion, and politics. And because of the rapidly growing number of humankind, it is forced to exploit and destroy the environment and the earth more and more often, and more to meet the increasing needs of all kinds. These needs are increasing with the growing number of humanity, whereby nature and the entire environment are more and more affected and destroyed, which of course has had a devastating and destructive effect on the climate for a long time. The planet itself is tormented, because atomic and other explosions disturb the structure of the Earth and cause earthquakes. Waters, nature, atmosphere, and the space close to the Earth are polluted, the primeval forests are destroyed and devastated for profit, and the Earth's resources are exploited irresponsibly. The recommendation of the hour and the future is, the madness of overpopulation growth must be drastically curbed and stopped, but this can only be done through rigorous global measures for a controlled halt to births, which must also be accompanied by decisive clarification of the situation, and which requires that only offspring be conceived if the social and all human conditions are in order, and no factors are to be expected which are contrary to human dignity. The social system, social norms and the security of society, humanity, the planet, the environment and the individual, etc., etc. Therefore, a worldwide and controlled birth stop must be used to reduce the world population to a reasonable level, because only in this manner can the increasing needs and the destruction associated with them ultimately be eliminated. The number of the earthly world population should not exceed 529 million humans by the laws of nature, because for this number an abundant supply is guaranteed by the planet. Even a figure translated 3 times, that is to say 1.6 billion 1,600,000,000, would still be acceptable and bearable for the planet and its nature, but nothing more. Time is hurrying and is becoming scarce, so quick action is called for, and this is your responsibility, you who sit in governments and other responsible offices, or you who are working as scientists and now know what is necessary to do to bring the future, life and the whole world back into balance, even if it will take a very, very, very long time and will take centuries, always provided that in useful and still foreseeable time the mentioned necessary measures are taken and enforced. You who are responsible, act now, because the clock has run out, and consequently all that remains is to start a new beginning in intellect, rationality, and logic. Otherwise, the final catastrophe will be inevitable. Pass this warning on to your successors, because their duty is the same as yours, and that of every single person on the earth, to act within the framework of the necessary necessity to protect, preserve, and lead the land and the earth, and all that exists, and was created by humans, into a healthy, good and positive future, as well as all that has been gained, all nature, the planet and its climate, the body and life of all humans and all animals that crawl and fly on the earth. Billy, Edward Albert Meyer, Simja Se Silver Star Center, 8495 Hinterschmidt Ruti, Switzerland.
Thoughts about overpopulation, its supporters and breeders, as well as its critics and opponents.
Most humans, be they ordinary people or specialists and experts, seem to be unable to see things and the questions and problems of our time in a larger context, to grasp them in their entirety and to connect the most diverse facts and findings with each other in order to draw tangible conclusions and consequences. Nevertheless, more and more fields of expertise and specializations are emerging nowadays, whereby one specialist often cannot communicate with the other because they do not know anything beyond their subject and technical language and do not want to know anything else. This makes this knowledge practically inaccessible to people who are not familiar with the respective technical jargon. But what kind of knowledge is this, one wonders, if it cannot be shared with other humans or only with a few experts due to its complexity and general incomprehensibility? If every expert or specialist idiot cultivates only his or her tiny area of knowledge competence and only knows about it within his or her limited scope, it is not surprising that in our highly specialized society there are droves of scientists, economists, ecologists, sociologists, politicians, consultants, philosophers and intellectuals who are unable to recognize that the root and main cause of all the evils of our time is overpopulation. How could they? If they are not even able to look beyond their own noses, there is much and loud-mouthed talk about all sorts of things, such as the redistribution of global wealth as a way to fight poverty, and the moral obligation to give more money and aid to poor countries. There is also talk about the need for the industrialized countries to reduce polluting emissions in the context of global warming, and about the looming energy shortages and resource depletion, as well as about urgent political measures to stem the ever-increasing waves of immigration, which are already resembling a veritable migration of peoples. There is also a great deal of debate and growing concern among pacifists and religious humans about how to deal with the ethnic conflicts, wars, civil wars, dictatorships, etc., which are increasingly frequent and widespread, and which plague our planet. But almost none the few exceptions confirm the rule of these debating people and the super experts hiding behind their abstruse, euphemistic and diplomatic jargon seem to think that there is a common deep cause behind all these serious problems and phenomena, which is overpopulation. Instead of finally acknowledging this fact and working out appropriate solutions, most expert gurus and do-gooders even deny the fact that the Earth is overpopulated at all. They claim that there is enough space on Earth for many more billions of people, because there are still enough empty or underpopulated giant areas. In the ranks of the blinded population breeders, there are even those who think that the Earth could easily accommodate up to 30 or 40 billion, 30,000 towers, 1,000 towers, or 40,000 to 1,000 humans, because in their opinion, technological progress or providence will one day automatically and finally eliminate all present shortages and hardships, such as environmental pollution and poverty, through new inventions and discoveries regarding renewable energy sources, food production, etc., so that there would then already be enough food and clean air for everyone. Furthermore, it is repeatedly claimed that the great mass of the Earth's people in and of themselves contribute incredibly little or nothing to the threatening environmental pollution and the greenhouse effect, because they are exclusively responsible for the obsolete and unclean industrial and production plants, power stations, and the massive car traffic, which is mainly in the developed countries. The overpopulation, or rather the current population level, has nothing to do with the increasingly frequent natural disasters such as earthquakes and seaquakes, floods, hurricanes, and heat waves, as such natural disasters have always occurred. Anyone who disagrees with this and persistently points to overpopulation as the root of all evil, in the sense that without its solution all other problems can also, or at least not effectively, be solved, is often branded a catastrophist or doomsayer, and not infrequently even goes so far as to accuse the advocates of global birth control and a temporary birth freeze of inhumanity, eugenics, and unauthorized interference in the private affairs of one's neighbor. But the question is, how can the advocates of ideologies be called humanists who, through toleration, open or disguised advocacy and promotion, as well as through the fine-tuning of overpopulation, that is to say, of the unlimited, uncontrolled and out-of-control growth of the world population, unscrupulously exposing hundreds of millions of people to starvation, misery, epidemics, wars, and civil wars, and condemning them to live in hell in the name of false humanist theories and religious dogmas that are far removed from reality? On the other hand, it is also to be noted that many of those who are aware of the ever faster depletion of fossil fuel resources due to rapidly increasing exploitation, and who speak in this context of a limit to economic growth, are not willing and unwilling to accept that there are also natural limits to population growth, since the Earth's arable surface on which humans can produce their food is obviously not only limited, but is constantly decreasing as a result of growing overpopulation and the resulting rapid increase in urbanization, according to some studies. As much fertile land was lost on the Earth in the 20th century as in the previous 1,000 years. It is also not the case, as some wishful thinkers and know-it-alls believe, that the insane increase in human numbers will end naturally at some point. That is to say, through epidemics, famines, and natural disasters, and that the population will normalize itself quite spontaneously and return to an environmentally compatible level. In all the attacks defamation and cover-up attempts against the few representatives of truly humane solutions to the grave evil of overpopulation, the Catholic Church and the Vatican play a particularly inglorious role. For, as is explained in detail in several recently published books, the Vatican has exerted and continues to exert a great, enigmatic and lobbying influence and pressure, both on the commissions, bodies and agencies at the United Nations dealing with the issue of overpopulation and on governments and heads of state of many Catholic and Christian countries in Europe, Africa and America. In doing so, they block all efforts, oppose through their vetoes, and allow everything to fail with regard to programs and plans of the international community, the UN or individual nations to curb overpopulation. It is therefore no coincidence that President Bush, who was helped to his fraudulent election victory by American Catholic groups and other Christian sects, shortly after taking office in 2000, enacted a law in return for which a worldwide education program for contraception, largely financed by the USA, had to be discontinued. The Catholic Church and other religions are secretly working meticulously to influence politicians in their favor, and threaten to stir up the population of Catholic and Christian countries against those in power, thereby jeopardizing the consensus if they take or plan undesirable birth control measures. In the past, at world summits and international conferences, as for instance at the Cairo Conference, the Vatican did not shrink from forming alliances with the otherwise hostile governments of Islamic states, and before that even with murderous dictatorships, as it was the case in the 1970s with the Chinese Mao regime when it was about imposing blockades with regard to possible birth control programs and the hypocritical population policy of Catholicism. Looking at modern history and the present, we can see, therefore, that overpopulation has been and continues to be advocated and cultivated for various reasons and on various political, ideological, and religious fronts and directions. Monarchs, dictators, despots, such as in the last century Hitler, Mussolini, Mao and Stalin, etc., were great and fanatical population breeders, because a growing population with many children served them and their politics for many purposes, such as the establishment and deployment of large armies to extend their power and sphere of influence through wars and conquests of other land areas and to exploit them. Then they were also concerned to have a large number of workers at their disposal, who were to be used on a massive scale in the construction of railways, towns, settlements, colonies, and other works. The rabbit-like bred humans were and are still used in many places by unscrupulous rulers as weapons of war and conquest and as working machines. Even in today's overpopulated industrialized countries, such as in Europe, a decrease in population is feared as a disaster by politicians and economic bosses, and therefore secretly or even openly a birth-promoting policy is pursued, because humans are regarded from a purely economic and materialistic point of view. That is to say, as a mass of passive consumers of goods and consumers with purchasing power and as tax and pension contributors. Because the more that is bought and consumed, the faster the economy and the market should grow, thereby increasing capital and profits. Since the time of the French Revolution, the conviction has been spread worldwide among farmers and the working class that for this reason many descendants must be produced in order to be able to recruit the necessary labor force from one's own family, which also spread the misconception that a large number of descendants is a good old age insurance. At the end of the 18th century, the philosopher Immanuel Kant advocated an ethic according to which humans should always be an end in themselves and never be used merely as a means to an end. A similar principle can be found in the teachings of the ancient prophets and sages and in modern times in Billy's spiritual teaching and in his many writings. But the ideologies by which overpopulation is bred contradict precisely this universal principle or law, for they used and abused the humans without exception as a means to their ends, no matter what they were. All the ideologies that have arisen in the course of modern history, some of which have fought against each other, have been based more or less on the absurd idea that the Earth's resources can be exploited infinitely and that consequently there is no limit to human and economic growth set by nature. But it is precisely this idea which, as a result of the demographic explosion, has clearly proved to be totally unrealistic, that is to say, theory and ideology detached from reality. It is an unpleasant characteristic and a habit of many human beings on our Earth to systematically throw to the wind every alarm and warning that is sounded in good time by responsible people who are sensible and intelligent, and even to cover it up with mockery and derision. This was and is the case with Billy Meyer and Figu Waradetriyapordi, as well as with others whose reports, articles, books, speeches, and prognoses on the overpopulation issue have either gone unnoticed or have been denied. This is particularly regrettable when one considers that many of them are outstanding personalities who are recognized in their field, such as the ethnologist Konrad Lorenz,
the biologists Ernst Mayr,
Paul Ehrlich and Lynn Margulis, the science fiction writer and polymath Isaac Asimov, the writers and visionaries of the future Aldous Huxley and Daniel Quinn, the science journalist Hoymar von Dietfurt, the astronomers and physicists Fred Hoyle, Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking, the ecologist James Lovelock, the political scientist Giovanni Sartori, and, last but not least, the engineer Aurelio Peccei, who founded the research group Club of Rome in the early 1970s and in this context initiated and published an important series of studies and reports on the problem of overpopulation. The first and best known report of this group, published in 1972, was entitled The Limits to Growth and warned of possible dramatic future scenarios such as extreme shortages of raw materials and food, environmental degradation, global economic crisis, and finally, the collapse of the Earth, which, as a result of an inexorable and constant growth of the world population, would become very probable in the not-too-distant future, or, in the worst case, even come true. The conclusion, which highlights a number of causes and effects caused by overpopulation and closely linked to each other, can be summarized as follows. As the population grows, so does the demand for food and other material goods and commodities. If the demand for food grows, agricultural production must consequently also grow. As this grows, so does the use of fertilizers and pesticides, and as a result the soil becomes increasingly leached and poorer, so that the erosion of fertile land increases. If the soil areas become more and more infertile, then agricultural production will also decrease, and as a result, the amount of food will also decrease. But if the amount of food decreases, the number of undernourished people and the number of starving people increases. If the demand for material goods and energy increases, then industrial production increases, and consequently the extraction of raw materials, the consumption of water and fuel, etc. also increases, thus reducing the Earth's resources. However, as the Earth's resources decrease, wars and conflicts over these resources become more frequent. And finally, if industrial production grows, pollution increases accordingly, and if it continues to grow, people's lives and health will be severely damaged. Since then, it has become common practice among most scientists and experts to claim that the reports and forecasts produced by this composite research group have proven to be completely false. And they try to discredit its members as errant Cassandras and as enemies of progress and economics, and to go down in the annals of history as such. It would appear that the warning cry contained in this controversial study report was a stumbling block to the scientific community and politics. But just how reckless and unreasonable the arguments of all those who reject the thesis of the overpopulation fighters and overpopulation warners were and are, without giving them enough thought or simply because of their learned prejudices and false assumptions,
can be read very well in the example of the following reactions to the above-mentioned report on the limits of growth.
Firstly, the economic representatives reacted with indignation because they assumed that a reduction in population would seriously affect economic growth and that, as a result, there would be stagnation and standstill in terms of the production of goods and technological development. The fact that the relatively sparsely populated Scandinavian countries have the highest per capita incomes, flourishing economies, and well-functioning welfare institutions was of course not taken into account. It was also assumed that a limitation or reduction of growth on the part of the West would be to the advantage of the countries of the Eastern Bloc. That is why the authors of the report were described as dangerous revolutionaries and traitors to the West. It was also argued that progress in technological inventions and the invisible and providential hand of the economic market and its natural laws would in future solve any problem of resource scarcity, and that there was therefore no reason at all to worry about population growth. Then loud voices were raised in the Catholic Church, too, which voiced harsh criticism of the report, because from their point of view every generation of descendants, no matter to what extent, as well as all life, according to Christian doctrine, is a gift and work of God and His providence, and that is why humans have no right to intervene in the divine plans in order to regulate or reduce the proliferation of human beings. For the Bible clearly says, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." However, strong objections and contradictions were also heard among the leftists and the 68, which amounted to showing that the ideas represented in this study would lead to underpinning the privileges and supremacy of the capitalists and the ruling class. Because by reducing growth, poverty and social differences would be further aggravated. The reactions at government level were no different. Because in the Eastern Bloc countries it was believed that the future disasters warned of in the report only applied to the capitalist states, because the greater organizational capacity of socialist systems made it possible to regulate the relationship between the production of goods and population growth through centralized planned economies and state power, so that environmental destruction would not occur. But the fact that the opposite was true in those very countries, and that the worst ecological disasters occurred there during the Soviet era, became obvious in the following years, and especially after the fall of the wall. It is clear from these examples that every party, every social group and stratum, every country and every government has shifted the responsibility for reducing population growth onto others. The North onto the South, the East onto the West, and vice versa, so that in the end everyone washes their hands of it and believes that this extensive plague on the earth always affects others and not themselves, and that the task of counteracting it is therefore only up to others. Things are similar today, although the Cold War is over and so-called globalization has exacerbated all problems of overpopulation through mass emigration and the Asian economic boom. But among the opponents of globalization, there is no willingness and ability to see reality as it really is in order to get to the bottom of all the evils on the earth. But they only want to fight them according to their external symptoms and not according to the true deep cause. On the other hand, in the eyes of the real reality observers and reality researchers, the close connection between strong population growth on the one hand and wars, conflicts, terror, anarchy, massacres, genocides and revolutions, etc. within individual countries and on a global scale on the other hand is becoming increasingly obvious, which of course does not mean that overpopulation is the sole cause of wars, etc. As is also clearly evident from the research results of the German genocide researcher and demographer Gunnar Heinsohn. On the basis of many years of historical and current analyses and comparisons, he has come to the conclusion that in countries where there is a youth surplus or a surplus of young people in the population, there is a need for a new approach. There is a strong increase in the young male population, so that children and adolescents between 0 and 25 years of age make up about 50% of the total population. The outbreak of ethnic conflicts, wars, civil terrorism and genocides is much more frequent and considerably more likely than in societies and countries where the proportion of the older population is much larger in comparison. Because when a country brings into the world a large and growing mass of young men who, mainly due to their superior numbers and the resulting overpopulation of their country, live in a state of joblessness and lack of prospects and social impoverishment, they feel increasingly frustrated and dissatisfied, which is why aggression and outbreaks of violence of all kinds are pre-programmed. There are also scientists who have drawn their attention to further connections in relation to the negative effects of overpopulation, such as the well-known animal behavior researcher Konrad Lorenz, who in his book Civilized Man's 8 Deadly Sins has investigated the connection between overpopulation, human emotional impoverishment, coolness, and general loneliness and anonymity, especially of city dwellers. According to his knowledge, the exaggerated and unnatural accumulation of humans in a certain habitat increases the potential for aggression and leads to the fact that one must increasingly protect oneself from one's neighbor because he or she is perceived as a potential danger and threat, so that one tends to withdraw more and more into one's own private sphere and to avoid interpersonal relationships beyond one's own circle of family and friends as far as possible. Lawrence was of the opinion that these deadly sins or main evils of our civilization are rooted in overpopulation and must therefore not be considered separately, but in their totality and interaction, because they are all interrelated. The major evils of our time, as he mentioned, are therefore the following: overpopulation, destruction of the inner and outer natural habitat, fierce competition between the humans, making them blind and indifferent to the true inner values, emotional impoverishment and generalized effeminacy of the humans, decay of the genetic makeup, disappearance of traditions and emergence of conflicts and separation between generations, increasing willingness of the human beings to indoctrinate, brainwash and patronize through political ideological propaganda as well as through advertising and media influence. Nuclear arms race. In the face of the immense reality of overpopulation, Biologist Ernst Mayr also pointed out that terrestrial humankind should develop a new environmental ethic. That is to say, an environmentally compatible manner of dealing with planet Earth, which places the emphasis on preventing and averting its pathological tendency to proliferate and takes into account the fact that overpopulation is the greatest danger and that reducing it is consequently the greatest challenge for the human race. He even went so far as to claim, rightly, that the work of those philosophers and religionists who encourage and call upon women to bear as many children as possible is tantamount to a crime against humanity, and shows that such individuals are devoid of any truly human ethics or humanity, because the latter should enable humans to transfer the consequences of their actions and decisions to the whole of humanity and to the earth. Since overpopulation causes death and misery on several occasions, he believes that all those who advocate it should be held responsible for the death and misery to which countless people fall victim through it. These are truly very brave and realistic words. In connection with the countless evil effects of the demographic time bomb which is ticking away ever faster, there is also the further fact that there is a direct and indirect relationship between population growth and the greenhouse effect in the form of excessive carbon dioxide being emitted into the atmosphere by the insane majority of the Earth's humans and the corresponding human works, activities and means of transport. Through the work of scientists Norman D. Newell and Leslie Marcus, who analyzed the period from 1958 to 1983, it was possible to prove that the constant increase in carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere runs exactly parallel to the growth of the world's population. They even claimed that the two factors are so closely interrelated that it is possible to calculate the world population level fairly accurately by measuring the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. From Pleiadian sources, it is now also known that even the simple breathing of several billion Earth humans and countless domestic animals contributes significantly to the greenhouse effect. A further tendency with regard to the overpopulation question, which can be clearly seen on close observation, is that if overpopulation is admitted to the Earth, it is usually only applied to the Third World and developing countries, because the Western countries suffered from a severe population decline. However, the fact that countries such as Italy, Germany, Japan, as well as Europe as a whole, and the USA are extremely overpopulated is usually not taken into account, because the natural population limit of a country is not calculated on the basis of its total fertile land area and the fact that 1 square kilometer of fertile land can feed a maximum of 12 people in abundance. This should be a simple concept, because just as every ship has a certain carrying capacity which must not be exceeded because it will sink, so the ship Earth has a human carrying capacity limit which, because of its limited total fertile land surface, must not be exceeded if we do not want to ruin it. In conclusion, it must also be said that it cannot be ruled out that the urge for uncontrolled and unnatural reproduction of the human race has become so deeply ingrained in the collective subconscious as well as in the individual subconscious forms of many people as a learned, instinctive and genetically transferable pattern of behavior that they no longer even become aware of this disturbed reproduction program, because it is automatically activated again and again as if it corresponded to a healthy, species-preserving instinct. However, this should not hide the fact that every human being is a self-conscious being who, as such, has the opportunity to think about his or her instinctive drives, to become aware of them and to control them. Andrea Bertuccioli, Italy.
Then I found an article out of my old written things, which I wrote in 1964 in Kabul, Afghanistan, and sent to the governments of Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, as well as to various German, Swiss, and Austrian newspapers, but never heard any response. If you want to read it, maybe it is good enough that I can put it in the special bulletin.
Let me read it, because I do not know it, because this falls into the 11 years during which you were in contact with Asket, which lasted until the 20th of September 1964. Perhaps she still has records of this article.
It is possible, but if you want the article, I can give you a copy.
Sure, thanks. But now I want to read your writing. Thanks. Oh, but that is 5 pages. It takes me a while to read it.
In the meantime, I can work on the computer.
Good. I am going to read
Quo vadis humanitas?
The period of revolutionary events, the dawn of the new era, began as early as 1844. This new era, which is under the sign of Aquarius, bears witness to the events that roll endlessly across the worlds and universes. The new era bears witness once again to the unlimited omnipotence of creation, for it is being, and being is all its creation. But quo vadis humanitas? Where are you going, humanity? Human, you most glorious creation of creation. You rush into emptiness, into a lightless, deadly perdition without return. You will fall into the darkness, where the demons of darkness, snarling their teeth and grinning diabolically, will strike at you with their clawed claws, humanity, to wipe you out and crush you with the mercilessly and fatally striking fist of a giant, the fist of your self-generated destiny, the gigantic and avenging fist of your own unreasonableness, which demands account from you, but which you cannot put down. For your life was not according to its meaning, for your life was a lie and deceit, filled with hatred, greed, lust, and addiction, with murder, war, and other crimes and acts of violence. You lived the life you had given to solve the task of life, but not in the sense of the laws and recommendations of creation. You have shamefully trampled on the true love, the goodness of life, and all the laws of creation and its nature, and pushed them into the dirt, while the generosity anchored in them sadly received your diabolical deeds and gave you a last chance again and again to remember and find your way back to the creational natural laws and recommendations. But you consciously ignored every single chance and shamefully stepped into the dirt because you wanted to live your own life. A life of selfishness, lust, and greed, a life of hatred, arrogance, lust for power, and war, far from the true laws of life. But this takes its revenge in the present time of upheaval, and this great time is now and in the near and far future. But humanity, what are you doing to face this great and new time, and therefore, quo vadis humanitas? Where are you going, humanity?
But this question, quo vadis humanitas, it does not only concern the humanity of the great masses.
No. The question of where are you going mainly concerns the individual, because all the many individuals form humanity, the humanitas of this twilight world, the world of disharmony and darkness, the world of the diabolical and demonic. The human being as an individual, the question mainly concerns you. Where are you going? Because you are wandering on the path of destruction, on the path of disharmony with nature and the creational laws. You are wandering on the path of death into a bottomless abyss, full of unbelievable horrors and deadly doom, lurking to tear you into its blood-soaked claws and to crush you mercilessly. The bony-clawed fist of the avenging giant of foolishness and folly tears you from your creational life and throws you into the maw of all-consuming destruction. The creational natural laws still give you one last effective chance. You, humanity, and you, individual human being of this earth, to save you from the agonizing end, that the revolutionary events are already bringing to the present and the coming time. Human being of the earth, you still have a really very last chance, which you can still take to prevent the worst, but consider that in a short time, it will be too late because afterwards there will be howling and gnashing of teeth as it has been transmitted from time immemorial. And the harbingers of this new time, which have been described over thousands of years, the catastrophes of all kinds, which are already growing into the uncanny, bear witness to the fact that the time of the fulfillment of the prophecies has come, and that the upheavals can no longer be stopped but can only be softened in their worst forms. In this, also the traditional prophecies of the signs in the sky have become reality. Because for years these have been seen and observed at all hours of the day and night and in all parts of the world, but unfortunately they are often misinterpreted and ridiculed. But the signs of the times are fireballs, explosions of rays in the atmosphere, Earth electromagnetic atmospheric phenomena, strange clouds and misty phenomena which appear by the hundreds like small flying objects. But there also appear beam ships, respectively, spaceships from foreign planets, which are steered by foreign peoples, who come here in order to indirectly enter into the evolutionary process of consciousness and into the action of consciousness through a proclaimer and his teaching of the Spirit, as well as through the teaching of the truth and through the teaching of the life, to intervene in the actions and work of earthly humanity because necessity demands it, because the earth human with their still limited consciousness forces the basic and structural elements of nature and life to react, in order to destroy in his or her insanity myriad life and the climate of the earth. Therefore, I raise my voice, because I know the future, and shout out a warning to the entire humanity of the earth, a warning based on the present events, which carry themselves further into the future in an evil form. The time has already come when the climatic conditions all over the world are beginning to change drastically through the fault of humans, and this will continue into the future with extreme storms of all kinds. Everything is already of such a nature that innumerable human lives, hundreds of thousands and millions, are and will continue to be lamented. Also, enormous destructions of all human achievements are expanding more and more. Destruction of mountains by landslides due to the thawing of the permafrost, and volcanism blows away large parts of mountains which fall down into the valley as mudslides, destroying everything. Destroying whole villages and towns and costing many human lives. All over the world, glaciers are melting, as are the ice masses of the Arctic and Antarctic. The global climate is rapidly warming up, leading to tremendous climatic upheavals, which cause great heat and cold waves, fires, droughts, floods, snow, and hailstorms. Increasingly, earthquakes and seaquakes and the resulting tsunamis on the seas and lakes are becoming more frequent, leading to further devastating destruction of human achievements and landscapes and mass deaths of people. There is enormous material damage to land, houses, and all kinds of buildings, to roads, railways, torrents, streams, rivers, and lakes. And more human lives will have to be lamented by these climate-related upheavals and storms. Because the rapid and increasing global warming and climate change is changing the whole of nature and the ocean currents, which are causing enormous upheavals. The whole animal world is also changing, and many mutations are taking place in many animals as well as in the plant world and in humans, where overpopulation in particular is to blame. Overpopulation is the greatest evil on the earth, because the further and faster it grows, the bigger, more extensive, and unsolvable all the resulting problems become. These problems exist in all areas, that is to say in medicine, in the dwindling drinking water, in the inexhaustible consumption of energy, as well as in the constantly increasing global terrorism. In addition, there are the wars instigated by criminal state powers, as well as the family tragedies which are taking on ever more serious forms and are also multiplying. But the growing problems are also caused by air and water pollution and pollution of the environment. by the increase in crime and criminality, but also by the general weakening of human health, consciousness, psychology, and body. Other factors that should also be mentioned are the blatantly increasing indifference of human beings towards their own and other people's lives, as well as the ever-increasing coldness of feelings and the dwindling interest in good interpersonal relationships. Useful leisure activities are also among the problems which can no longer be overcome, for instead of pursuing them, only pleasure and idleness are sought and cultivated. Inevitably, this also increases the brutalization of humans against their fellow men, nature, and the fauna and flora. People are becoming more and more susceptible to allergies and diseases affecting them, to degenerations of the sexual life, to psychic degenerations, to depressions and suicides, to psychopathic and paranoid impulses from which murders and mass murders, as well as the mistreatment of fellow human beings result, which are more and more carried out by young people because their whole education fails completely in every respect. More and more cowardly people appear who throw away their lives because they have become incapable of bearing pain and suffering and end their lives by dying naturally. Quo vadis humanitas? Human being of the earth, you are creating havoc for the planet and for all life on an unsuspected scale. And the destruction you are causing in nature and in life is spreading throughout the world, causing enormous damage, destruction, misery, and distress. Torrents and streams become torrential rivers. Rivers become raging torrents, while wild waters overflow all banks and cause tremendous floods, devastating all land, destroying countless human achievements and existences, and costing hundreds of thousands and millions of lives, along with other disasters. Also, as already mentioned, primeval volcanic eruptions occur, along with tremendously extreme earthquakes and seaquakes, whereby all the catastrophes become worse and worse and ultimately can no longer be stopped. Everything is still happening on a small scale, but already from the 1970s onwards, everything will increase to such an extent in the next decades that by the end of the 20th century, everything is already getting very unusually and badly out of control. But that does not mean then in any wise the end of the worldwide catastrophes caused by the human's fault, because when the new millennium has just arrived, nature will rebel even more powerfully against the environmentally destructive madness of Earth humans and reach a level that is equal to the primeval times of the Earth. If we look at and analyze the coming events and catastrophes that will befall the Earth, the climate and humanity, we can clearly see that it is only humankind on the Earth who is to blame for the whole thing, and that, as already explained, is due to the ever-growing overpopulation, from which all problems arise that can no longer be solved in a simple manner, but only through radical and rigorous global laws and their observance. The guilt for the coming disaster and chaos, as well as for the catastrophes, basically comes from the enormous mass of humanity, even if pathologically stupid and irresponsible know-it-alls and scientists claim the opposite. Overpopulation alone is the factor of all evils, both in the shortage of energy and drinking water and in the destruction of nature and the environment, as well as global warming. If an existing problem of this or any other type of overpopulation is tackled and a solution is found and implemented, then during the period of implementation of the solution, the whole will be overtaken by new problems of the same or other type. Because during the period of implementation of the solution, the world's population or overpopulation will increase by hundreds of millions of people, making the solutions worked out null and void and overtaken by similar new problems. Asylum seekers, neo-Nazi and extremist movements, migration, global terrorism, and new wars will also spread, creating discord, hardship, and misery, and other major new problems. Against all the evils that emanate from Earth humans and that he or she has caused by the unreasonableness of the cultivated overpopulation on all life, nature, climate, atmosphere, waters, as well as on the fauna and flora and on the whole planet itself, very harsh and drastic measures must be taken. This also includes measures against the world domination machinations of those state powers that criminally trigger wars and terror all over the world, that carry out wars and acts of terror themselves and plunge other countries into chaos, while also wanting to trample on the mentality of the people and break and eradicate their religion and politics. Due to the rapid growth of humankind, it is compelled to destroy the resources of the earth in order to meet the increasing needs of all kinds of humankind. But all these needs are increasing with the growing number of humanity to ever greater masses, whereby nature and the fauna and flora, but also the climate and the entire environment are increasingly affected and destroyed. The planet itself is being tormented and slowly destroyed, as nuclear and other explosions disrupt the structure of the Earth and trigger earthquakes, seaquakes, and volcanic eruptions. Waters, nature, atmosphere, and the space realm close to the Earth are polluted and poisoned, while the primeval forests are destroyed and devastated for profit. The recommendation of the hour and the future is that the madness of overpopulation be stopped at last. Although this will no longer be able to stop the climate change caused by humanity, rationality and intellect can somewhat curb the destruction, devastation, chaos, and catastrophes. For example, by restoring natural water courses and floodplains and stopping the over-exploitation of the planet and of nature and fauna and flora, because only in this wise can the worst still be avoided. This, however, requires that the madness of overpopulation be stopped by taking effective legal measures. The overpopulation, or rather the world population, must be contained and reduced as a matter of urgency by a worldwide controlled birth stop, because only in this wise can all the increasing needs of humanity of every kind and the further destruction associated with them ultimately be eliminated. A great deal has already been done to ensure that the predictions come true, which is why it is also necessary to take measures against this. Pollution from fossil fuel engines of all kinds and from smokestacks, etc., must be curbed as a matter of urgency, along with all other forms of environmental and air pollution. It is also of the utmost urgency that all human structures of any kind, such as homes and factories, etc., disappear from avalanche and flood-prone areas. Floodplain landscapes, etc., must be returned to nature as natural water catchment areas for floodwater. Residential buildings and factories, etc., may no longer be built along torrents, field streams, on lake shores, in or on avalanche slopes or water-prone plains, etc. In addition, extremely urgent precautions must be taken along streams, rivers, lakes, roads, residential areas, slopes and mountains, etc., by erecting very strong and high structures in endangered areas where wild water can flow over or where mud flows. Snow and mud avalanches and landslides can occur and cause damage in order to protect houses, paths, and railway lines from being washed away, flooded, buried, or torn away. This will be necessary in many places, because much of the predicted chaos and catastrophes will unfortunately already be inevitable, and time is running out. So action is called for, and this is the responsibility of the whole earthly humankind. The Earth human has to act before it is finally too late, and nothing more can be done at all to stop the irresponsibly initiated process of climate, destruction of fauna and flora, as well as the destruction of nature and planets, and the extermination of humankind. And what is to be said further? The beam ships, respectively, spaceships of foreign intelligences from distant worlds, are no fantasy. Because they exist like you and me, they are not cloud agglomerations, balloons, lightning, flocks of birds and the like, as they are so gladly called by scientists and leading authorities, by opponents of the truth, or by laymen who do not want to make themselves ridiculous with the recognition of the existence of the so-called UFOs. These unknown extraterrestrial flying objects, if they are not, as is often the case, top-secret earthly military aircraft and planes, they are real, as thousands of very good photographs, films, and reports prove. And there is no shortage of real contacts, even if there are very few of them worldwide and only a small handful in number who have spoken with extraterrestrials. They all testify to the real existence of the extraterrestrials and their objects, the beam ships. They and everything else testify to the effective existence of the extraterrestrials, even if this existence is ridiculed by the terrestrial authorities and evil antagonists as not being proven or simply presented as a hallucination or even a lie. But for what reasons do the denying authorities and antagonists maintain very secret UFO reconnaissance groups, etc., which have the task to clarify the origin of the UFOs from space and to arm them for a possible space war or a sudden invasion from space? An idea, by the way, which corresponds to a complete nonsense, because the space humans do not control our Earth in order to conquer or subjugate it. If they wanted to, they could have done so long ago, because their technology reaches to the fantastic compared to the earthly one. And the earthly weapons of all armies would be nothing more than a toy for them, which they would throw away as rubble and useless junk due to unworthiness and uselessness. Moreover, their very highly developed technology goes back many centuries and millennia, so that if it had been in their will, they could have conquered the Earth when it was still in antiquity or in the dark Middle Ages when it was growing towards its present state. But why are the authorities so eager to find out the secret of UFOs, and especially the unsolved mystery of the radiation propulsion, which makes the extraterrestrial aircraft or UFOs fly through the Earth's atmosphere at speeds of up to 100,000 kilometers per hour and more, neutralizing the gravity? So why this secret research under exclusion of the public, when everything is supposed to be only lies and deceit? Why that? The authorities are afraid. Frightened, deadly fearful, for they fear an attack from space. And for this purpose, it would be urgently necessary that they themselves be in possession of beam ships and ray weapons, so that they could counter the enemy attack already in world space itself. Others, however, fear panic and rampage of the population. If they should really become aware of the existence of the extraterrestrial UFOs and their crews, because panic and rampage already rolled over the population of different countries. When UFO sensational reports, so-called direct reports from the place of the event, were broadcasted over the radio stations. Direct reports, however, which did not correspond to the truth and were only sensational radio plays. The number of deaths of the population running amok went into high figures. However, the authorities, who stop practically all UFO reports if they have real backgrounds, do not consider that the panic of the masses will be much greater one day, if the extraterrestrials should really come in masses, in order to prevent perhaps the greatest insanity of the earthly humans and to change the face of this world for the better. If the revolutionary events which are caused by the humans of the earth in a responsible way roll over this world. But it is questionable whether extraterrestrials ever interfere in earthly matters in this respect, because they have directives which would only allow them to intervene under certain conditions. A real contactee, as well as reconnaissance planes and simple observers of real extraterrestrial flying machines, that is to say, UFOs, are dealt with by the authorities as well as by the people, and by malicious adversaries and slanderers, are disgracefully treated and accused of lies and fraud, and may even be imprisoned for many years in a mean form and wise or interned in insane institutions. Because, as already mentioned, the authorities are unwilling to reveal the profound truth. They do not shy away from publishing denying notes and treatises in the newspapers, or from having them published by bought-in laymen, critics, opponents, and so-called experts. For these reasons, in various countries, a real contact person, of which there are not even a handful, an observer or spotter, plays with his or her freedom when he or she takes his or her tasks seriously and tries to let people know. And the few people who have or have had contact, not even a small handful, have a very difficult position because they encounter hatred, mockery, disbelief, official intrigues, and partly religious-based destructive statements, as well as slander and much more. I have had to experience firsthand how intrigue-filled the official methods use. In my youth and youthful years, prison and madhouses were the consequences of my educational work. I was robbed of my freedom as a supposed thief, burglar, and gangster boss, although nothing like that was on my conscience. For many years I had time to think about my mission, because the authorities did not love my reconnaissance work even in my young years. Officially controlled false accusations by my brother-in-law, who was paid by the authorities, led to defamatory police reports and the like, which were presented to me and which I was forced to sign. Otherwise, I was put to starvation in the prison cell and put to sleep on the stone floor. Forced signatures were to prove for all time that I had been a thief, burglar, and gangster boss. After years, I saw freedom again. But then, I fled my homeland on a higher mission and wandered around the world for many years, homeless, because years had to pass before the untrue stories about me were forgotten at home. During all this long time, I had the opportunity to come into further contact with all kinds of people and with all kinds of species and types of animals, as well as with the forces of nature, and especially with extraterrestrials and their devices, as it was already the case from my young childhood years. But the grinding mills of earthly laws also haunted me in the wide world outside. In Jordan, in the Holy Land, among other things, I was arrested as a spy from Mars and banned for life from the country, probably because they feared the revenge of the Martians if they were to liquidate me. However, 130 very good pictures and negatives of extraterrestrials and UFOs changed hands in confiscation in this case, because the Jordanian Secret Service confiscated everything. I had similar experiences in Syria, Persia, and Spain. Shots fired at me from ambush often missed their target by a hair's breadth after their release. And once again, I was forced to flee a country, months and months that seemed endless. Hard and often life-threatening adventures had to be endured in the jungles and deserts, in the slums of the big cities, in the bush and in small villages, and on the endless stretches of country roads. In many cases, I only just passed the crossroads of life. But fate had it changed, and so I was saved from the end. But through it, I became richer in knowledge, will, and experience, and matured to fulfill the mission I had been given. After many years, inspiration showed me the way to India, and I got there by the quickest route through the Persian and West Pakistani deserts. Then, at my destination, lying there with severe malaria fever, I was stolen from and robbed to the last. Hard, difficult months followed. No work, no money, living practically only from what my hand could barely touch. But during this time, the mission that I have to fulfill matured in me for good. Signs of the times became visible for me in the sky, showing me the way and the time. As already in my early youth, during 11 years until the beginning of 1953, by the extraterrestrial Svath, I was now being taught and trained by the extraterrestrial Asket since 1953 until September 20th of the year 1964, in order to go the way of the herald of the truth and the way of my life. So the time came when I had my path clearly before my eyes, so that from January 28th, 1975, I could go the path of my mission alone and fulfill it, as Asket explained to me, the path of the silver robe, the path of the herald of truth. So now I knew the path I have to follow and the goal I had to strive for, and a number of loyal ones will gather around me who will walk my path with me, and then, when I leave the present life, continue the great mission so that one day there will be peace, true love, freedom, and harmony among earthly humanity. So now I know extensively my mission, which I have set for myself, and which several of my former personalities have already fulfilled in past lives. So I know where I have to go and what I have to do. But you, human being of the earth, you as my neighbor, quo vadis, where are you going? Where are you going, humanity of the earth? Quo vadis humanitas? You err on the path of darkness, on the path that leads to ruin without return. Save yourself, for it is still time for complete conversion. In order to walk on the path of light, of the creational natural, on the path of light of the truth of omnipresent creational laws, on the path of good itself. Humans, turn your back on your previous life and find your way back to the creational natural laws and recommendations. Find your way back to the real path of real life. The path, however, cannot be found and walked through religion or sectarianism, so it is not enough for you to hurry to church daily or every Sunday to shine that you are one of those who are diligent churchgoers, to listen to the word of the priest at every opportunity and, if possible, to sit next to him in the first row of seats, that everyone can see you well and see that you are listening diligently to the word of God and are so close to the clergy, going to the mosque, the temple, the synagogue, or any house of prayer to pray, or that you do not miss a word from the representative of the religion who conducts the service. Humans, such action is not a law of the creational truth, not a creational natural order, and it is not the meaning of life. If you do not find the way of truth out of your own knowledge and do not deeply understand the word of truth, trust it and follow it, then it is better for you to hide in the deepest lake of shame. If you do not walk on the path of the truth of the creational natural laws and recommendations, then let at least those who wish to walk on it and seek the effective truth find this path unchallenged. Do not curse and condemn the seekers of the truth, for their step and presence on the path of truth does not serve their own fame and not to shine like a beryl, aluminium beryllium silicate, a shiny glassy mineral, but their consciousness-based evolution, as it is given to humans by the creational laws, as the meaning of life. All human behavior in every respect is also anchored in it, both in relation to fellow human beings, to being human, to nature, to fauna and flora, to the climate of the world, and to the planet itself. But if you contravene this, Earth human, your own punishment will overtake you before you know it. For the era of coming events is advancing and leaves no time left to play with the further breeding of overpopulation and with the destruction of the climate, as you have done so far as an individual human being and as a mass of humanity. For a long, far too long time all the evils were played with, and played with shame, but now the masses are overflowing, because the jug goes to the well until it breaks. Humankind and humans as individuals, whether poor or rich, whether small or large, beggar or worker, humans in every position it concerns you, my words are addressed to you. Turn around and follow the path of true life as determined by the natural laws and recommendations of the creation. For only a short time is left when great disaster will come upon the world and upon you, and will demand an account from you for all the destruction you have caused by overpopulation among humankind itself and to all nature. To fauna and flora, to the climate, to the atmosphere, to the waters, and all around. In the writings of the millennia, it is written, "Love your neighbor as yourself, for he or she is your bodily brother or sister, the one who was given the breath of life." Humans, therefore, stop all your hatred, greed, daily strife, murderous wars, and all selfishness. Love your neighbor as yourself, but also nature, the fauna and flora, and the planet that is your home and your aegis. So, it is written, respect the signs of the times that will be in the sky when the time is approaching for revolutionary events to occur. Human beings as individuals, respect these signs of the times, learn to understand them and do not misinterpret them. Know their truth and do not regard them as strange miracles, for a miracle is only a word as a concept, but its value has no meaning. Consider the signs for what they are, the product of a mighty law which you have broken through overpopulation and all the problems arising from it, and have caused enormous changes and destruction worldwide among humankind, to nature, fauna, and flora, as well as to the climate and the planet itself, bringing hardship, murder, crime, war, terror, misery, and ruin upon the world. The signs in the sky are not only aircraft of extraterrestrial origin, but mainly signs of the effects of human irrationality. Signs that reveal themselves as devastating storms of all kinds, because global warming and climate destruction and environmental degradation are forming into unimagined catastrophes. This is already part of everyday life. But you, human being of the earth, have still not grasped it and have not understood that you are to blame for these evil events. Blame because you continue to increase overpopulation and thereby create ever more enormous, unsolvable problems which you can no longer cope with. Therefore, turn back before it is finally too late, for there is still something you can do to avoid the greatest catastrophes. But act quickly, because otherwise it will already be too late in 20 years. Because then the catastrophic effects of your wicked actions can no longer be stopped, and nature, life, the planet, and the climate will let the consequences of human unreasonableness break over humankind and the planet with primeval worldly violence. Human being of this earth, you still have one last chance, a short deadline. But remember, only a short time will be left for this deadline to roll over this world before my words prove to be truth, words of prediction, which will soon be rounded off if you continue in your traditional style. But then it will be too late for you and the masses to whom I once again ask the question, Quo vadis humanitas? After the 20 years I have mentioned, the process of destruction of the climate and nature will be unstoppable if overpopulation is not reduced by radical birth stops, thereby reducing all problems until they disappear for good. If this does not happen, the problems of all kinds will increase immeasurably and can no longer be overcome. But through this, the existence of the whole of humankind and the planet is put at risk and questioned, and consequently it is possible that one day earthly humankind will erase and destroy itself through its unreasonableness and through its stupidity and egoism. And there will be no God there who will open an ear for humankind to hear a plea for forgiveness and the prevention of evil. Because where no God exists, no one can hear anything and no one can bring help. Basically, you, human being of the earth, are your own Lord and Master. For you alone are God, and therefore you bear full responsibility for all your actions and work, for all your thoughts and feelings, as well as for your entire destiny, of which you are the smith. Kabul, Afghanistan, 16th September 1964, Billy.
It is always amazing to me how you can put the facts. Yes, your article is very good, so I think you should add it to your special bulletin. I will also attach the article to my archive. It is probably necessary that I ask it if she has any other things of yours that I probably do not know or own.
She did not tell me about that because I never asked. But you can ask her about it.
I will do that sometime. But now it is time for me to go. But I do not want to miss the opportunity to tell you about a few more extraordinary things that are happening, just as my glimpses of the future have shown. I will tell you more next weekend when I come to the correction work. Already in a short time, tomorrow Saturday, an earthquake of magnitude 6.2 will occur in the south of Chile. It is not very unusual, but it is worth mentioning. Then it must be said that after this weekend in Russia, former President Boris Yeltsin will die at the age of 76 as a result of heart failure, after which, after his funeral, Russian President Vladimir Putin will deliver a government speech in which he will denounce the machinations of NATO and the USA in relation to their interference in Russian politics and their plans to build a missile defense shield or missile defense stations in Eastern Europe, which are supposed to serve Iran's threatened missile attacks against Europe. The truth is that behind these plans are the irresponsible U.S. President George W. Bush and his vassals and irresponsible NATO members who fear Russia and therefore want to arm themselves with the shield and a tissue of lies. These plans force Russia to cancel existing agreements against rearmament, or, as the case may be with regard to disarmament, because Russia rightly sees in the missile deployment plans an imminent danger against itself. The whole thing has already developed into a maturing danger that Russia and the USA will once again start an open arms race, for which George W. Bush and his cohorts are mainly to blame, because their greed for world domination knows no bounds. It also turns out that in Palestine, the Hamas organization is terminating the ceasefire agreed with Israel. The political calm that has been maintained for some time is coming to an end with these events, although it is to be feared that everything will deteriorate again in political terms.
One more question, please. What is it actually like to drink cold water or any other liquid when the body is heated by any effort? Your father Svath once told me that you should only quench the worst thirst, because otherwise the body becomes even more hot, if more is drunk than necessary.
That is correct. A heated body should neither be quenched externally with cold water, nor should one's thirst be quenched with too much cold or cool water, or with too much other liquid. If the heated body, even if it is only slightly heated, is quenched with cold or cool water, this can cause life-threatening reactions, so such an action can lead to a quick death. Drinking too much cool or cold water and other liquids when the body is heated is also dangerous to health and sometimes even life-threatening. Because drinking too much water or other liquids when the body is heated does not cool the body down, but heats it up even more, and thus thirst is increased. Therefore, if too much drunk water or other liquid, including milk, is not immediately eliminated by sweating, it can lead to heat accumulation and thus to heat stroke, which can also lead to death. As a rule, in order to quench thirst and replace lost fluids, no more than 1 to 2 deciliter of water or other liquid should be drunk. Anything more is unhealthy and makes the body sweat, which also causes a lot of body salt to be lost. In order to quench your thirst, the best is to drink a small glass of hot tea or coffee, unsweetened or sweetened with only a little white sugar. Brown sugar or sweeteners should be avoided as they are much more harmful to health than white sugar. Brown sugars and sweeteners also have the property that they can trigger a susceptibility to stress, whereby stress in turn causes a shrinking of the brain. The further consequence of which is anxiety, which quickly becomes chronic, resulting in damage to the psyche and depression being the ultimate consequences. But this does not mean that white sugar should be particularly healthy, because it is also harmful to health and leads to obesity.
Svath said that, and it is generally accepted. He also explained that if a person drinks 20 liters of water in a short time, he or she will inevitably die.
That is also true. In general, Earth humans drink too much because wrong medical rules, etc., claim that humans generally have to drink a lot of fluids. The truth is, however, that every person has a different need for fluids, so there can be no single rule. The type of liquid does not play a major role if it is unsweetened or only slightly sweetened. Of course, it is important that the liquid in question is well tolerated by the person and does not cause allergies, etc.
Like milk and dairy products, for example, which humans have only needed as food for about 8,000 years. When humans discovered milk and invented dairy products such as cheese, butter, yogurt and kefir, etc., and used them as food, many more died from it because the human organism could not tolerate it, and the metabolism could not process it because it did not have the necessary enzymes. That is why a great many people died when they ate milk or dairy products. Only in the course of thousands of years did the human organism develop these enzymes, through which people slowly got used to milk and dairy products as food. However, even today there are still many people who lack the necessary enzyme balance, which is why they react allergic to milk or dairy products, often putting their health at great risk.
The whole thing is really as you say.
The dairy industry is always promoting how healthy milk is.
Milk is not as healthy as the advertising claims, which is why it should only be enjoyed with moderation, just like dairy products. Children in particular should not drink much milk because their metabolism has to get used to it, and the necessary enzyme balance has to be created and set in motion first. But not everyone can do this, which is why there are many humans who are allergic to milk and dairy products. But now, my friend, I must go. Goodbye. See you next weekend. I will probably be there by Friday afternoon.
Fine by me. Take care, Salome.